Okay, then Keith,
Yep, you're right.
all ready?
Yep.
Okay, then I'm going to call this April 9th, 2018 Plan Commission meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Chris Dahmer,
Here.
Steve Kraus,
Here.
Gary Hertzberg, Pat McGowan,
Here.
Brad Zeman,
Here.
Ryan Malish, Tim Black.
Here. Okay, first item on the agenda is minutes. Look for approval.
Move approval is presented.
Second. Motion by Steve Kraus, second by Brad Zeman. Any other comments? Call the question, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Public comment. If there's anybody who would like to make a public comment, I've got forms for everybody, so the different agenda items that you indicated for, I'll give you the opportunity to do your public comments during those sections. But we have actually a couple of people here that would like to make a comment right off the bat. Sam Kaufman, 908 Turnberry Drive, just indicated that he's opposed. Would you like to speak, Sam?
No.
What are you opposed to, Sam? It's on the back. Sorry, I do not support the wall project. It would result in loss of affordable housing and historic structures. All right, it's on the back. Maria Pat, 1000 Wexford Drive. Would you like to speak?
I can use my teacher voice. You've heard it before, Chris. I just have a simple question that, if I'm being redundant, I apologize. But I'd like to know what the boundary is for what's considered downtown. Street to street, or however that works. Given the fact that there is so much commercial development along Highway Q, and will possibly be more, will that eventually become part of downtown also? So I'm just kind of curious, what is downtown?
Okay. Ed, would you be willing to answer that question? Or staff?
I'll try to speak up. Downtown, it's really, it's defined in our zoning code as the historical downtown. There's a map that goes along with that. And then there's also a map that shows when we had a downtown redevelopment plan put together. So there's some maps that go along with that. They're all available on our website. And if you need help navigating our website, you can call my assistant Tracy, she'll raise her hand. And call her as a village hall, and she'll help you find the maps that you're taking a look at.
Okay, then we have Nyla Fry, 404 East Verleen Avenue, Village of Waunakee.
I think I can handle it, Chris. Okay, how many lower income housing units will Waunakee lose to redevelopment? Every time a redevelopment project occurs, taking down affordable housing in Waunakee, prices for remaining housing goes up. Inclusive housing makes it possible to sprinkle in affordable and worker housing into all development in a community. Inclusive housing eliminates future problems. When affordable and worker housing is mixed in with all housing developments, the problems of deteriorating areas is less likely to happen. At the same time, making it easier for school districts to avoid possible unequal education in schools. While attending the listening session a few months ago, I heard Ann Held, previous president of the Village of Waunakee, talk about the need for affordable housing in Waunakee for our senior citizens. It sounds to me as if the people who worked for years to make Waunakee what it is, we're losing, not because of death, but because of lack of affordable housing. Affordable housing is not affordable in Waunakee. There are senior citizens who want to live in mixed housing, not senior housing. Citizens living in senior housing are considering moving because funds from selling their homes are depleted and they can't continue paying rent here. Others would like to sell their home and move to apartment living, but to them it doesn't make sense. The taxes on their home is less than rent in a small apartment. In the event maintenance isn't affordable for their home, it won't happen. Waunakee will end up with many unmaintained single-unit homes than the village has in the TIF area. We are losing our young people. Those working in the trades, young professionals, and the young people working in our shops and restaurants can't afford to live here. Once they leave, they're gone. It's a big loss. Do we want a town where all middle and low income workers need to drive in every day? It isn't enough to have a great quality of life and wonderful schools when those who help make Waunakee what it is are pushed out. It isn't enough to have nice shops and restaurants when those working in these places can't live here. The board talks about the high cost of land driving the cost of housing. Some realize the board can work to come up with a plan to mandate affordable house and worker housing in every development or redevelopment project. With determination, it can happen. It will create a community where everyone can participate. We need projects that provide the community with what it needs. Due to federal mandates, municipalities are responsible to build either senior housing or lower income housing. Waunakee builds senior housing. Why aren't we creating lower cost housing? The village can stay on the path it's on, or it can stretch a little to help build a place for those who work, as well as those who have lived here for years and want to remain part of the community. We can continue to allow economics and money to be the primary factor in development or redevelopment, or we can consider the needs of the citizens in our community. A short time ago on PBS News, a business tycoon was interviewed. He was asked, "Are you moral?" His answer was, "I am a businessman." Can the village combine good business with morality to do the best for all the residents in Waunakee?
Thank you. Sorry, thank you.
Probably speaker demand.
Are we only allowed to do public, I just want to understand you. We can do public comment with whatever is on the agenda at that time, correct?
Yes, I'm allowing for different things. We have them broken down by the different things, different topics we're going to talk about. Okay, first item we have, is there anybody else? That was it for all I had for the public comment section.
I didn't see that there was public comment allowed, sorry. And this is different than what's on the agenda.
Okay, go ahead. This is Ann Lewandowski, 103 West 3rd Street.
Hi guys, as you, I sent you an email earlier this week talking about some issues that I've seen and some potential solutions in terms of some of these redevelopment challenges that you're encountering. And some of that is this concept of transact areas and how these different housing types can merge together rather than remaining independent. And so as you guys are thinking about how to address your zoning ordinances, which I've heard from developers, and I listen to them, surprisingly enough, that these are really inadequate, and how this Euclidean design theory and how you try to keep it all separate and based on density, it's just not enough. And I'll agree with that, and I think there are better ways, and I would encourage you, rather than just trying to half-heartedly approach it from a form base, that you really roll into that and embrace it and say, yes, we are going to be some of the first and best communities to embrace this and say, this is what we want, this is the form that dictates it, and we are not going to be constrained by something as silly as density. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, then we're moving on to old business, Woodland Crest annexation update. Kevin? Kevin,
And I don't know if there's any of the applicant here. Chris, the update is that we've met with the applicant. We've had some exchange of emails, and at this point, we're asking to continue to table this. We've asked for additional detail on their request. They're asking for a rezone and an annexation. We want some more details before they be presented to the Plan Commission. One of the things that we're asking for is that we advise them to seek PUD zoning, and so that they don't use just traditional zoning, because in this area, we want to see more detail than what the traditional zoning would require. And so we suggested to them, I think they're working on it, and there's a number of issues with the annexation that we want to resolve before we bring it back to the Plan Commission.
I'm just going to make one comment on that particular parcel. Roberta did a nice job reporting on this parcel a couple of weeks back, indicating that we may possibly be getting another grocery store in Waunakee. This is where that parcel was talked about. Nowhere did the Plan Commission or Village Board guarantee that we were going to have a second grocery store. Okay, it's only been a proposed thing from the developer that might be one of the options that go there. Nor are we against any other grocery stores that are coming in, to be very clear. I'm speaking for myself, but from everybody that I've heard from, there's been no talk of saying we don't want another grocery store here. So to be clear, that was posted today, that we had guaranteed or made some sort of mandate that we were going to have another grocery store. That's not the case. We don't do that. The grocers would be coming with the developers at that point, if that comes to fruition. So just wanted to clarify that for everyone. Okay, new business. Public hearing and discussion action on a request to rezone the Waunakee Veterinary Clinic at 701 West Main Street from C2 to C1 commercial.
As far as procedure, Chris, I would suggest that I make a brief introduction. We give the applicant, 5, or I think he said he could do it in 5 to 10 minutes, probably closer to 5, a presentation of why they're asking for that request, and then we open up the public hearing.
Okay.
All right, we have a request I'll just talk to you. I got it. Can you hear me in the back?
No.
All right, I'll use it. All right, to give you a sense on where this property is located, can you see my mouse? Yeah, the mouse, here's the McDonald's parking lot on Highway 19, the Piggly Wiggly parking lot is right here, and the Piggly Wiggly is in the back. There's a request to rezone this property from C2, which is really highway commercial, to C1, which is general commercial. And we did include in the packet, hope you had a chance to take a look at those, in terms of what the permitted uses are for the highway zoning to the general commercial. Generally, they're very similar, but one of the things that the C1 allows for by conditional use, so it'll still take another step after the property would be rezoned, is multifamily housing. And I think if you look at this, or I lose it, this area is bordered by pretty much general commercial in terms of restaurant and grocery store, and on the other side of the street is multifamily. So in terms of consistency with that particular neighborhood, changing that to C1 is certainly appropriate. What you're not considering tonight, though, is the proposed actual use on the property. This is actually just permitting, it'll give a list of permitted uses and a number of lists of conditional use permits. You're not voting on, you're not even considering in terms of approval of what their proposed use is. And I think that the applicant can share with the Planning Commission why he needs this change in zoning in order to move forward in a timely manner to make this application. There isn't any guarantees that he will get approval on what he's proposing. It just would give him the opportunity to make application for that. So with that, Chris, I would suggest that we let him make a presentation and then public hearing. Sure.
Good evening. My name is Brian Sweeney, and I'm with a group called Cohen Street Development Group, and we're out of Overland Park, Kansas, but I get to live in a great little downtown just across the river in Minnesota called Stillwater, Minnesota. And we are affordable and workforce housing developers. Been around for 25 years. We've done approximately 50 what's called tax credit projects in 7-8 states. We've recently entered Wisconsin, and I work in Wisconsin. We have our first project in downtown Reedsburg that's going to be under construction beginning this week. So we are proposing what's called a workforce affordable housing product for this particular site. And we are respecting the current zoning requirements of C1 as far as height, as far as setbacks. And I think the kind of unique part of or type of project that we're presenting is that we're saying workforce housing. What does that mean? That would be product at 60% of median income. What does that mean? For a family of 4, 60% of median income in Dane County and in Waunakee is approximately $55,000 a year. So all of the units, and we would be seeking tax credits from WHEDA, the Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development Authority. And as Kevin suggested, that's not a done deal, but we are moving forward with making those requests. And in order for our project to be considered by WIDA, it has to have the proper zoning. And we're in discussion with the city and discussion with the current owner. I think there's a general sense, in addition to what we are proposing, that future redevelopment of the site, having more options, including some housing on this site or mixed use, is a good thing. So we have a bit of a timing issue of asking for the rezoning. So there.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to open up the public hearing at this point for anybody who would like to speak. I've got one written comment from Sam Kaufman, 908 Trinberry Drive. It should have been mentioned in the agenda that the rezoning is for apartments. It is misleading and should be postponed until better notice is given. Anybody else that wants to make public comment?
Mine was there, sorry, I may not have been clear enough. So generally, as you guys know and have heard a lot, that affordable housing seems like it's something that we as a community are valuing more and more. So generally, I support this plan. I have given the developer a little feedback on if you have 1-bedroom apartments under the 3-bedroom apartments, that may create some conflict, but that's not your guys' issue. What I do see as a potential challenge for you is we were assured as citizens when you guys went to this higher height standard in the downtown that that would not come. And when I looked at the proposal, this is a 4-story proposal. So please, when you are rezoning, please think about that, particularly in light of the recent discussion and challenges and frustrations from some citizens in terms of other apartment buildings. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, then I'm going to close the public hearing. I'm going to actually probably, Todd or Brian or Kevin, as far as the comment about this not being noticed properly, if you could address that.
I think the thing that planning commissioners need to clearly understand when you're taking action tonight is that if you do approve the rezone, all of the commercial uses, I'm looking at page 18 and 19 of the packet, all of those permitted uses in the C1 district can occur on this property. It's not just multifamily, and I would note that multifamily is a conditional use, it's not a permitted use. My understanding of this proposal is that it's very early on in the process. There is the potential it could happen. There's also the potential it could not happen. And when it comes to the issue of notice, I saw the email. I would take a different approach. My approach is, first of all, there's no doubt in my mind that the notice is appropriate. I would also hesitate to create an expectation that there would be housing here. Because again, your decision tonight, if you approve this rezoning decision, opens up this property. And I think Kevin had mentioned it, I think, from a planning perspective, when you look at the uses in the C1 general district versus the C2 district, the highway district, it seems like the permitted uses in C1 are more appropriate for this space. But you need to understand that if you approve the zoning change, all of those uses are open. And so if this, for example, if this housing process does not move forward and then the property owner comes in and says, you know what, I want to put in dry cleaning and laundry, that's going to be a permitted use. And so, ultimately that is the reason for why the notice was stated the way it was, because everyone needs to understand that all of these uses are open for the property if it is in fact rezoned from C2 to C1.
Okay, so I'm going to open this up to our Plan Commission members to make comments.
Yeah, just quick,
Yeah,
quick question. What does our comprehensive plan say about this property? I'm assuming, does it talk about that corridor at all specifically? I guess that's Jason.
Yeah, the comprehensive plan, I believe, identifies this property as West Business District, which has some similarities to downtown, but clearly different from downtown. So it's grouped in with, that district extends all, in all four directions from that intersection of Q and 19.
So Jason, would that exclude C1 zoning? It's one of the, it would, okay, because that's one of the things we look at in a zoning change. Is the zoning continue to support our comprehensive plan? In this case, it would.
Yeah, that would be the dominant use in that.
Making a change seems pretty straightforward. There's nothing out here that's going to be glaring to the community, or I don't think bring any residents into alarm. I feel like this is a pretty straightforward change from C2 to C1.
Okay. Sorry, I should have looked up sooner.
Okay, just a question. How many units did he be proposing, or has that nothing to do with this at this time? How many units?
So I was just going to address that actually within. So once the public public hearing is closed, we can't do any more comments. But I will say that to Ann's point of the 4 stories and the height, that's not even really part of what we're talking about tonight. That still has to come before us, and we'd have to go through that whole process before anything could even potentially happen. So, I don't see any reason, based on what we're looking at here, I think it does fit with the comprehensive plan. I think that the uses are appropriate. I'd look for a motion if we have one that would want to approve.
I would move to approve the change in zoning from C2 to C1.
Motion by Pat McGowan.
Well, to be clear, we're just making a recommendation.
I'm sorry, recommend approval of the zoning change.
Okay, so we have a motion by Pat McGowan, second by Tim Black. Do we have any other comments? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, next on the list. Public hearing and discussion action on amending the list of conditional uses in the general development plan for the Waunakee Business Park 2.
Staff has prepared the general development changes based on direction from the Plan Commission at the last meeting. In essence, it allows for the addition of adding as a conditional use in phase 2A, daycare center for dogs, including kennels and veterinary care associated with the daycare center. This would allow the proposed use that you heard about last month, the Zen Dogs, to make an application for a CUP and site plan in the business park.
And I just wanted to say, it looks like a lot of information. It's literally just one sentence. If you look at page 30 of your packet, up on the top of the page, that's just the subparagraph 4 is added as that conditional use. So that's actually the only change.
In case you're wondering, 1 year ago, basically today, I had knee replacement surgery. This is no problem anymore. So I'll recommend them getting up and down. Okay, so we'll open up the public hearing for this item on the agenda.
I didn't catch where this was going to be.
So this is out in the industrial park.
You can't read anything from here. Okay, so I was confused because it says development plan for Business Park 2. And I thought what was out there was Park 1.
Okay, it's out in the business park. Out-
Here, I got it now. This is, so it's off of Hogan Road, an ice skating rink. It's, 2 is generally this
Okay.
area.
Thank you.
So general area is out by the hockey rink in that direction.
What side of the hockey rink?
I'm sorry.
What side?
West. What side west of the hockey rink?
Okay.
Towards Waunakee. Any other comments? We did have Lynn Wonderl? Wonderly, sorry. Did you want to comment at all, Lynn?
I just that I support my business. I just hear all the time how much we need it, to say.
That is not a first that we've had at the Planning Commission, that they do support their own business. That is awesome within there. So,
I support
okay.
Waunakee.
Then I will close the public hearing. And any comments from any of the committee members? All right, otherwise I'd look for a motion.
Make a motion to recommend approval of the ordinance amendment to the village board.
Second.
Motion by Pat McGowan, second by Steve Kraus. Any other comments? Call the question, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Next, we've got consultation on updated concept plan for T-Wall Enterprises redevelopment of 200 block of West Main Street. Who's introducing it? Brian?
No.
Kevin?
So this is strictly on for concept review only. It's really expected to get feedback from the planning commission members back to the developer. We do have some staff comments, and I'll let Jason go through those. So in terms of process, Chris, what I'd recommend is, certainly you can change this, is that we hear the presentation from T-Wall, and then we hear the follow-up with some staff comments, a staff report that was provided in the latest packet. And then I think you can make a decision on how you take comments.
Who's
Thank you. I'm Terrence Wall, T-Wall Enterprises, the developer. So I have 3 sections of our presentation, so settle in. It's going to take some time. The first section, we're going to just talk about the need. The second section, we're going to talk about changes that we've already made. And then the third section, we'll get into the PowerPoint at that time with the actual proposal. So now that we've approved the K9 multifamily, we'll move on to the human multifamily. So we've conducted some community outreach. We've had 2 neighborhood meetings already, and this is our second meeting with the village. There'll be numerous other meetings coming up. We're actually reaching out right now to the Chamber and to Rotary to try to get in front of those groups to continue part of the outreach program that we're doing. But in terms of multifamily, you've heard about the CARPC study, and that CARPC study demonstrates the need for multifamily. Certainly the commercial space that's vacant on Main Street demonstrates a need for more residents living in and around Main Street. In terms of, and by the way, these comments are, I've structured these around questions that were raised at these various meetings that we've held. So I'm trying to head off some questions. And certainly you'll have the opportunity to ask questions after we're done with our presentation. At that time, we'll sit down and we'll make notes of any comments that you, or questions that you give the Planning Commission. So typically, in terms of a school impact, we have typically fewer than 3% of our units are occupied with families with children. That's just what it is on average for all of our units. And if they are there, they're only there for a year while they're getting their house built and then they move out. So we don't have that many units with children. Our units will be primarily will be all studios, 1 bedrooms, and 2 bedrooms. We don't plan on having any 3 bedrooms. So there'll be very little impact on the school district in contrast to a very, very large tax base that we'll be producing. We do pay the fees. There are fees that are paid at the time of development for your police, fire, EMS. So we'll be supporting those organizations through your normal fees. In addition, what we found is multifamily has resulted in resident retention. You can retain your young people here in the village, adult children of village residents. You can also retain empty nesters who move out of their homes and don't want the maintenance, don't want the home, have to take care of a big house. They will move into our buildings also. And then what we find is, even though there'll be some young people who will continue with us for 10 or 20 years, there'll be other young people who will move in with us maybe for 5 or 10 years, and then they'll find a home. And when they move into our building, they want to find a single-family home after that that's within close proximity, within the same neighborhood, the same community. They typically don't go off and move to another community. So those young people, when they do move out, they support the single-family housing. They will be buying homes that are in the village. And then lastly, we found that in every case where we've developed, property values around our development have increased. There's never been a case of any property value decreasing adjacent or near our development. So the second section, we're going to talk about some specific changes that we've made since we started this process. So we've heard a lot of good comments, a lot of questions, can't accommodate everything that people have asked for, but we have been able to accommodate a lot of things. And I want the Planning Commission specifically to know that, when we finally do come before you for an official request with an official application for a vote, I want you to know that we've been a long way down this process, that we've made lots of changes by that time, that we're not coming to you with an initial proposal expecting to make more changes. We'll be coming to you with a proposal that we will be asking for approval of based on all the changes that we've had and all the input that we've had. So tonight, I just want to point out that we're not asking for any action. It's just informational, as you know. So this is purely a conceptual review. There's no action required by this board tonight or commission, other than if they want to give individual or collective feedback to us, we will make note of that feedback and then go back and consider what we can accommodate and what we can build into the development. So in terms of some specifics, on 2nd Street we reduced the height from 4 stories to basically a 2-story home-like design with a gabled roof, and inside the gabled roof is a 3rd unit. We went out and surveyed homes in the village, and there are numerous homes like this that have a room up in the gable. Maybe there's another gable on the side or a dormer off to the side. So we basically reduced the height along 2nd Street and incorporated the unit in the 3rd floor basically within the gable. So it looks and is the height of a 2-story home with a gabled roof. On Main Street, we have 3 stories and we stepped back the 4th floor. So if you're walking along the sidewalk on Main Street in front of our building, you can't see the 4th floor. The Main Street building, we're also going with a flat roof, specifically because, again, that means it's a lower height. The 4 stories with a flat roof is no higher, in fact, it's lower than 3 stories with a pitched roof. So I just want to point that out, that we're no higher than a typical 3-story building. The phasing of the project, we were originally going to build Main Street as phase 1, and then build the 2nd Street building as phase 2 and phase 3. Based upon feedback that we received and input from around the area, we've flipped that. So we're taking the 2nd Street side of the project and we're going to build it all as one phase. That would be the first phase. And the reason why we're doing that is for a couple reasons. One is, once we build the 2nd Street side of the development, we go back and we build the Main Street side. Now the 2nd Street building is blocking the construction, whatever, noise, dust, whatever, from residents in the neighborhood. So it acts as a buffer while we're building the Main Street building, rather than the other way around, which would mean that residents would be putting up with basically 6 years of construction, every other year, 6 years of construction. We're now down to basically 2 years of construction, probably spread over a 3-year period. But then that second phase, it will be buffered by the first phase on 2nd Street. So the other reason is because when we build the 2nd Street building, it has a disproportionate amount of parking. So they will have excess parking in the second phase that we can also allow the construction laborers to park in the garage of the first phase of the building while we're building the Main Street building. We also have the bike store under contract, and we're planning on basically turning that lot into temporary parking for our construction laborers. It could also be some material storage, but the Main Street buildings, those lots will be available during construction of the 2nd Street building for material storage and construction activity, and then park our laborers over on the bike store lot. So again, this is all designed to minimize the impact of construction on the neighborhood and the residents, and those are some very significant changes compared to what a normal construction process would occur. In terms of the number of units, we were up in the range of 175 to 180 units originally. We came down to a lower number, and then with further redesign and looking at the whole project again, we came down. We're now in the range of 136 to 140 units. Just want to point out the unit count could change slightly if we change the mix, from studios 1s and 2s. If you change up the percentages of those, the number of units can change. So that number is still in flux, but we're down around 136 to 140 units, so a significant reduction. The other option we're presenting to the Planning Commission tonight is two different options. Option A would be for a small amount of commercial space on Main Street, 1,000 feet, so very small, single storefront. And then basically the rest of that space on Main Street will be, our leasing office, our fitness center, community room, club room, that sort of thing. Option B, the reason why we're presenting option B, which would be 10,000 square feet on Main Street of commercial space, is because we've been approached by a business that would like to be in Waunakee and would like specifically to be on Main Street. So if that business decides to lease with us, then we'd go with option B, which would be 10,000 square feet because it would be pre-leased. Under option A, which is only 1,000 square feet, we're not proposing a lot of extra vacant space because you have vacant space on Main Street. It needs to be leased up. A third of the Lone Girl building, the Hubby building, is still vacant on first floor. And so we feel it's important to get that space leased up, and bringing additional apartments in will help do that, but bringing more retail that's vacant will make it worse. So we don't want to make it worse. I just want to point out those specific changes. This is a process. We'll continue to go through this process. I can guarantee you 100% that there will be other changes. It will not be static. And so if you see other changes in the future, just be aware, we kind of said heads up, that is going to occur. Nothing's frozen in place literally until the moment that a vote occurs. There may be changes right up to then if we get ideas in that we think we could try to incorporate. So now let's talk about the actual development. We have this is a completely new design on 2nd Street that is totally innovative and creative and new. I'm not aware any developer's done this before, but we basically, instead of presenting to 2nd Street a typical apartment facade, which is a long, very monolithic, linear type building, it's all the same colors, it looks all the same, it's just repetitive form. We have created architect Joe Lee, who's here tonight. You can blame him. Joe has done, and his team have done a terrific job. Two of his architects are here in creating a very, very innovative design, which is basically, it's single-family homes, although they're all attached halfway back, And so they look like single-family homes along Second Street, but if actually, technically, it's one building, and they're all attached in the back. And along the alley, we certainly have more of a typical apartment look, but that's in the alley. So as we go through this, each of these, what I'll call single-family homes, technically it's not that, but I'm just going to refer it that way, is either 1 unit or 2 units. So the first one here, you can see on the corner, has 1 unit in the first floor. Correct me if I'm misstating anything, because we've made lots of changes, and sometimes I might be thinking about a past design. But 1 unit on the first floor, 1 unit on the second floor, 1 unit on the third floor. So then you go to the next single family, you have 2 units. So most of these have 2 units on the first floor, and 2 on the second floor, and 1 on the third floor. So you can, who's doing the slides? Or okay, it's Kevin. So if I just wave my hand, you can go to the next slide. This is the other corner. We looked at some of the housing in the neighborhood. Notice that some of the homes have sort of that old style Victorian wraparound front porch. So we created a wraparound front porch on this corner. You'll notice some bay windows. I don't know if you have a laser pointer here at all. No. But there's bay windows to the right there. To the right. The other right. Right, just right after the main corner, to the left, a little to the left, right there, yeah. There's bay windows, which you typically find in towns like Waunakee. We've got that wraparound front porch, we've got the second floor porch, we've got that gabled turret at the top. The roof pitch is a steep roof pitch, because that's what you have in most homes in Waunakee. So let's go to the next slide. This is Main Street. Now this is not done yet, and this is looking from a distance. So we have 2 alternatives that we'd like to get input from the Plan Commission on. Oh, great, super. Okay. By the way, just go back to the other slide. Just want to point out, each of these front facades, one thing I missed was, has a different look. It's got some different colors, so each one is a different, it looks to be like a different home. So this one is a corner one. There's a single entrance here, a single porch, lattice work on the porch, which you see in some homes. This one has a gable on the side of the roof, a different entrance. There's 2 walk-up steps here, pair, with a different, if you can just subtly see that different roof treatment here. There's a roof over this balcony, none over this one. There's a little tiny roof here, different window treatment. As you move on, you might see a dormer rather than a gable. You might see a center stair. In fact, if you back up one more slide, here's a pair, then here's a center stair. So there's a side stair. So each of these not only has different colors, but different porch and different balcony and different roof treatments, different window treatments, and different dormers or gables on the side or none. And so every one is different. We haven't decided on the colors or anything yet. We'll have to try to figure that out so it looks appropriate. And go on to the Main Street side. So the Main Street side, we have 2 designs we'd like to get feedback on. And this isn't fully detailed, just so you're aware. That, all the details aren't here, and frankly, even if they were, you wouldn't be able to see them at this scale. But basic concept is to make it look like small buildings built on Main Street over time by designed by different architects, built by different people, just like the old days. So this is very much like the Middleton Center that we've just recently finished, phase 1. So here you have a little walk under the corner. So we have a step back entrance. We have curved, headers on the windows here. A different roof or parapet facade here, treatment. Here, that's brick. Here we went to a hardy plank, but with a smooth face limestone type block. Here we went back to a brick, balcony that comes out from the facade, maybe a sign that is, on top of that, not a balcony, but a overhang that covers the entrance. And here we went to hardy plank, again, different color, some detailing up here that you'd find in small towns. Different entrances here. And then I want to point out here, we went with the larger windows. This is kind of like an old warehouse building that had those large, small paneled windows, and those were taken out and then replaced with modern glass. That's what that is intended to look like. But we have a piece that was added on. This is a 2-story, kind of like an atrium, entrance for the businesses in here, the business, a single business, or our entrance to our apartments. So it's a little more modern looking, and sometimes in the old warehouse redevelopments, you see, a modern entrance put onto those. So that's what that's mimicking. So that's one option for you to consider, and then of course the repetition down here. And then our 4th floor step back, we've made a little more visual so you can see it here. We're intending that the color here kind of match the sky, so it's more of a sky blue or a gray, fade away. We deliberately did nothing fancy up here to make that fade away, and when you're walking along the street in front of the building, you can't see that. Go to the next slide. This is just some of the detailing that's going on here. On the left side, or the east side of the building on Main Street, there would be a sidewalk that would go along this back, towards the back of the building here. Next slide. So this is the other option to consider. We'd love to get your feedback on this. Remember how right here we had that 2-story glass atrium look entrance? So this is a different treatment where we did a 1-story, with the overhanging canopy, the sign on the canopy with the cables coming out from the building, holding it up. It's a single story, a little bit of a parapet there, but so that's something you can think about and give us feedback on. We deliberately did not do anything up here. We could have come in with a turret or a clock tower or something like that. We tried to make this, just bring it down, lower scale, quieter, nothing that grabs your attention. Next slide. Next slide. Go next one. This is the garage. You can see here on the 2nd Street, right here, side of the development, 129 spaces versus 61 on the Main Street side. So if we build the 2nd Street first, that will buffer the neighborhood over here from the construction of Main Street, and will give us excess parking for some of our laborers during construction. So I think that's that was good feedback from neighbors and the community, and we're going to change it and also go with 1 phase here rather than 2, so they don't have to wait, put up with another round of construction. That was also good feedback. We took that to heart. The entrance here would be off the alley with an appropriately sloped garage down in the garage. We did look at somebody suggested, and we did look at, what if we brought an entrance out here to West Street? And the architect looked at that, and it's just too short. The ramp is extremely steep. Probably would get the bottom of the car caught on the concrete as you come over the top of it. It's just too steep, and it just won't work. So I just wanted people to know that we did look at that, took an honest look at it, ran all the numbers, drew it up, and it just won't work. So in terms of the alley, we'll repave that, also rebuild that, so it's, would be brand new. Next slide. This is kind of a landscape plan or outlook of what this will look like. We'll blow up the landscape plan. This is very, very tentative. We got to get into the landscaping with the Bruce Company and really detail that for you later. This is just conceptual right now. We have just a beautiful courtyard inside for residents to use. Here is more the pool deck. That will be fenced in, but with a see-through fence, but a pool deck with a hot tub and a barbecue a grill area and a gas fire pit. So just some very, very nice outdoor space. It's just going to be beautiful here within the development. Very attractive. Here we created a secondary entrance, and again, this is a secondary entrance. This, we still are debating, if we have the 10,000 square foot tenant, they'll take this up, and our leasing office entrance will be off of West Street here. If the 10,000 square foot doesn't go in, then our entrance will be off this corner, not here. This is just purely a convenience entrance for people out walking, want to get out and walk on the 2nd Street. One of the things we got feedback on was about parking and all this. We've got way more parking than we'll ever use for our residents. But we're going to require in the lease that the resident has to park on our property. So they'll be required to park with us. They'll have a decal on the back window. If they're parking out on Main Street overnight or something and you see the decal on their window, you can call us and we'll go remind them they need to comply with the lease and park on our property. We used to offer, well, in many areas we offer parking cafeteria menu style where, you know, I want the apartment, but I want parking, or I don't want parking separately. Here, we're going to include the parking in the rent. So again, it's not a question, you know, it comes with the lease and the rent. It's built into your rent, so it's not like you could say, well, I don't need the parking, I don't want the parking, I'll park on the street. No, that won't be an option here. You'll be required to park on our property. Next slide. So I just want to emphasize, you know, in addition to design issues, we've made some, we got some feedback about operational issues, so we're incorporating, you know, that feedback into things like the parking, into how to operate and better manage the property, so it alleviates some of the concerns of the neighbors. This is just a typical, floor plan of the different kinds of units. I'm not going to go into detail on that. This mix may change slightly. This is the one with the entrance off the corner. We will have a leasing office with a leasing agent on site. We'll have a game room, we'll have a community room, we'll have probably a fitness center with an adjacent room for yoga and other group activities, group exercise activities. So we'll have quite a few amenities in the development. Given the number of units that we have, we can do that. If we start going below, we start getting down around 125, we've got to start cutting out the amenities because the costs, we just can't support the cost. So this property is chock full of amenities. It's very high quality. Next slide. You can keep going. Just keep going. Here's the one with the commercial space. They would have an entrance off this corner. It's just a blank right now. So next slide. You can keep going. Keep going. There's our setback, 4th floor. Our units are turned sideways there. Keep going. No more? Okay. So I just wanted to ask Joe if you would like to highlight anything you want to go over in terms of anything we missed or highlight architecture or...
Just one thing I'd say. You did a pretty good job. If you could go back, please, to the very first image. One thing I will point out is this is modeled fairly accurately of the street. So this is 2nd Street. Here are the existing homes across the street and beyond. And you can see how, as we have evolved this design and the scale and the breaking down of the scale of this building, we are really relating to the existing conditions out here. This is a pretty wide cross section. So I just wanted to point that out, that scale-wise, we're very sensitive to that. And like Terrence said, this is conceptual. There'll be many other opportunities to give feedback, and like you said, we'll try to incorporate what we can into the design as it goes forward.
We talked also about, you can hold these for me. We talked also about each of those front facades, all those front facades, not lining those up, right, Joe? That each of those single-family home designs, they're not all at the same distance from the sidewalk. So one will be further back, one a little closer, one further back. So they vary just like a series of single-family homes would vary along a block. So again, we tried to mimic what goes on in Waunakee, what's going on across the street, and what's going on in the neighborhood. Some people in the neighborhood meetings, et cetera, brought up, the so-called historic nature of the housing here. And I apologize for the owners of these properties who own these and are here tonight. Don't take this personally or anything, but I did want to highlight and show you. I don't know if you guys can see that.
I feel like I'm in a box.
Yeah. So we took some photos. In terms of, if you drive along 2nd Street, this block's the worst. I mean, you've got Quonset huts, you've got hodgepodge of different old garage buildings of different kinds that are in disrepair. You've got, lots of stuff outside in the lawns. Do the next board. You've got lots of chipped paint. You know, these buildings are getting old, they're worn down, they're worn out. You know, this building's hard to see, but this doesn't, you know, this is, you know, it's basically there's no paint on anymore, or it's, you know, way scraped off or whatever. This, you know, there's stuff all over, you know, there's buildings literally where there's rotted siding. This again, almost the paint, all the paint on this structure is almost gone. It's hard to see here, but there's chip paint, there's lots of stuff going on here. Next one. You know, there's buildings that are almost ready to fall down. Lots of stuff on the ground, just junk, you know. So, in terms of, you know, for your benefit as a planning commission, if you haven't had the opportunity to go out there and drive, you know, down the alley or down 2nd Street, you know, there are blocks in the village that look nice, but this one is probably the most aged, most in need of, you know, significant maintenance, but it's not feasible for these owners to repair them. They would never recover their investment. I mean, they're gone. These buildings are too far gone, and literally structurally obsolete. You know, you'd have to really take it down. Even the studs would not even be appropriate to hold on to. You know, you need all new electrical, new plumbing, new insulation, new roof, new structure. I mean, basically like tearing it down to the ground and starting over. So the investment in that for these homeowners is not feasible. So it's just, this isn't gonna, you know, if anybody thinks that somehow magically that these particular structures are gonna somehow get renovated, they're too far gone, it's not gonna happen. The property owners told me that it's not gonna happen. So, you know, I don't want to kid anybody into thinking that this is somehow going to be renovated. It's not. So this block, in terms of its appropriateness, in terms of being redeveloped, is appropriate for redevelopment. Unlike other blocks, which are really nice. I mean, they're quite nice and have been renovated, some very nice homes. So we're going to try to bring this up to a better standard and develop what looks like, when you drive down the street, single-family homes. And by the way, this design on 2nd Street will wrap around on West Street, and will wrap around on Fish Street until at least the alley. And once we get towards the alley, we make a transition as we get closer to Main Street to more of a Main Street facade. There's a transition point there. But we are wrapping those 2 streets also with this concept. So that's it for us. I'd be happy to take any questions from the Plan Commission, and then I'll sit down and shut up, and we'll take notes on what everyone else has to give in terms of feedback. Do you have any questions at all?
So this is not a public hearing, but I think it's appropriate for right now. Go ahead.
I think Jason had the memo and the planning commission might want to just add some comments from staff.
Staff before?
Yeah.
Okay.
Initial feedback from the planning commissioner, and decide how you want to.
Okay.
All right, Jason Valerius, planner with MSA, and was asked to take a look at this in the context, especially relative to the comprehensive plan policies. There is also in your packet an email from Kent Strauss of Strand, and I referenced that in my letter. Basically, Kent's email makes clear that the project as currently proposed isn't approvable under current zoning, and without going into all the detail, basically the heights and the setbacks and the unit count is not really permittable. I think the assumption was PUD zoning, and your ordinance currently requires a 5-acre minimum for PUD. So some sort of, if this were the project that we're going to come forward, some sort of ordinance revision would be required to make it approvable. But also want to recognize that the point of this exercise tonight is to get feedback from the village and from residents, and so on the village's behalf to kind of reflect on what's in the comprehensive plan and offer some of that feedback. If we could go, Kevin, first to the commercial, the Main Street side. So this actually wasn't available before. I'm seeing that for the first time tonight, but one of the things that the comprehensive plan looks for is architectural and scale compatibility with other buildings on Main Street. And so in terms of architectural compatibility, I think we're seeing some nice effort here to break down what is a relatively large building into vertical pieces, which is something that you have right now in your older buildings. And I think with the exception of one piece here, which I'll get to in a moment, I think I could see this in terms of form being approvable. The one piece that I think is going to be problematic is the fourth story. So you recently went through a process of revising the C1D district, and you allowed for height with some pretty strict limits on what that fourth story could entail. And while this does do a bit of a setback to minimize, I think it's a modest setback, and that would be a fairly visible fourth story. So in terms of scale, I think that there would be some difficulty approving this as is. Without that, I think that this would fit, could fit the C1D zoning and be approvable. The other thing I would note is we saw a couple of different options for how much commercial is on the ground floor. The comprehensive plan certainly looks for commercial on the ground floor, as does the zoning, that C1D zoning district. Let's look at the Second Street illustration, back to the first slide. There are in multiple places in the comprehensive plan references to the importance of making new development compatible with existing development, for having having a variety of housing types within neighborhoods, and then working to get the transitions between housing types to be acceptable. And so certainly we're talking about a lot more units here than are currently there. But the comprehensive plan doesn't really address density. And the density by itself, the number of units, doesn't especially concern me. It just isn't a topic that is addressed in the comprehensive plan in a direct way. The architectural strategies employed here to make what is a fairly large building fit are very effective in my opinion. So as this comes back again, this effort, and there's a whole bunch of things going on here in terms of varying where the building wall is, showing different architectural detailing for each of these pieces. I don't know if I characterize them as single-family homes. I would call them two flats, if you're familiar with that. And there's a first floor apartment, an upper floor, or maybe the top two floors. But nevertheless, I think that you could definitely make the case that this is an appropriate transition across the street from single-family. So I think this has rendered a very successful attempt to take what is a fairly large building and make it work. So I think kudos to the team for that effort. The last thing I would note, again, talking about this, the importance of compatibility of scale and of transitions with the surrounding development, is that it would be helpful to see images of the actual nearby buildings, be it working them into the perspectives or doing some elevations that show the actual nearby homes, or maybe doing some sections that show us the new and the across the street existing. So I think that would help everyone understand just how the new and the existing relate to each other. So I think that was the extent. Did I miss anything?
This is definitely an improvement, and I haven't seen these yet. I guess one thing, I totally agree, and I think somebody had sent me an email, and I had requested that a complete section across the street be done. I echo what Jason said. on Second Street. I'd be curious what's across the street on Main Street as well. I think what we have to be careful of is that we have certain development going on at the core of the village, and that's referred to as the central business district. And you have a remnant industrial corridor there that was related to the railroad corridor and some of the traditional flat top buildings. That was then emulated with the new bank. The Huckney project did a great job. But as we go to the east and the west end of the village, I would look towards, what's the name of the gallery on the far east? I mean, that building has a scale that's very similar to what they're proposing on Second, but it isn't this post-industrial one. So I'd encourage the architects to perhaps take one more look, and because there really weren't any lofts or manufacturing on these ends. It was agriculture, and the industrial lofty area would have been the crossroads of Main Street and the railroad corridor. But you can go to other towns and you can see wood frame construction with storefronts at the ground level, residential above, offices that are not Main Street buildings. So that's my opinion, but I've only seen this tonight, but I throw that out as to encourage to broaden our creativity. Did I make any sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Everybody looks white again. That lighting can't when I went through. Okay, so what I think we'll do is give everybody that wants to speak an opportunity to speak right now. I do have several people from T-Wall that are in support. Do you want to speak as well? Didn't say that you wanted to speak, but I will say that Vicki Furseth,
Support.
2912 Marketplace Drive, Madison, Wisconsin is in support. John Schmid from JLA Architects is in support. He lives at 3252 Cami Circle, Sun Prairie. Leah Teskey, 2418 Crossroads Drive, Madison, 53718. JLA Architects supports. Terrence, did you want to say anything else after your presentation? Are you still here? I can't see you, sorry.
I stuck around.
Okay, okay. He wrote down presentation, so I'm assuming that. That's okay. And then John Hepner, 2585 University Avenue, T-Well supports. Anybody else from T-Well that I missed? Okay. And I'm just going to go through everybody else's, and if you'd like to speak, feel free to comment, and please come up here if you want to speak, and please use the microphone so everybody can hear. Can everybody hear me right now? I should have asked that before.
Thank you for using the microphone.
You're welcome. I wish we had more of them. Okay, first we've got Larry Kipley, 5910 Pelma Drive.
5910, but it might be my bad handwriting.
5910, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Well, we heard a lot here tonight. I guess, again, my name is Larry Kipley. Full transparency, I own 2 properties on Main Street. The Healthy Glow and the one in between the Packer and Healthy Glow. We call it the Cookhouse because that's who we bought it from. I heard a lot again tonight. I think there's a lot of good here on both sides, and I think we're going to hear some complaining, and we're going to hear some people agree with this. I guess I just want to go on record here. I'm not going to take a lot of time. I think I'm going to keep my powder dry for another evening. But for the most part here, I really think that we need to look at this a little bit with an open eye. And I've had people call me and ask, why do you want to tear down your historic buildings? And unless the village knows something that I don't, we do not have historic buildings. They're quite old, possibly built after the turn of the century. When I lease the buildings out, the state, the federal government requires me to put a lead notice out. We have that on every one of our leases. We also have asbestos in some of these old houses. We've got foundations that I guess I wouldn't want my grandchildren living in. And I really want to sell my 2 properties, quite honestly, for the highest and best usage. I don't think that's out of range. I think there's a lot of good commentary I heard from the people that live here. I guess have a little respect for the people that own the property and would like to sell them. It's up to the village, the board, to set the standards. And I think there's a pretty good run of what you've already accomplished. And again, I just want to speak in support of it, and I'll end it there. Any questions for me? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, then next is Jan Ebersetzik, 204 West 2nd Street, and she's opposed. Opposes the T-wall project.
I like my neighborhood.
I like my neighborhood, sorry.
I like my neighborhood, and I think I can speak.
I'll still give it to
loudly
you
enough.
just in case.
The one thing that really concerns me is the one exit from the alley. How are all the people in those apartments going to get out strictly on Fish Street? I don't understand how you could close the exit on to West Street, close the exit, or the alley exit onto West Street. How is the fire department ever going to get in there, or anybody get in there, if they only can enter from Fish Street? I mean, that's just one huge concern I have when I looked at all of this. The other thing is I don't quite understand how he's getting all this greenery and this courtyard work and the space back there between these buildings and the alley. You can't grow any more dirt. I just don't quite understand that, but again, that's just my way of looking at it. But I'm really concerned about that. Only one exit onto Fish Street with the traffic. I've heard a lot of talk about traffic. We know what the traffic is in Waunakee in the morning. Nobody can make a left turn anywhere. And I think it's going to be a huge problem for all these people that are leaving for work in the morning and have one exit onto Fish Street. Where are they going to go? Left or right? I don't know how they're going to get out. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Elena Drazen, 205 West Street. She's opposed. Also against West 2nd Street inclusion. No T-wall in this town. Elena, any other comments?
Nope, that says it all.
Okay, thank you. Colleen Webster, 204 West 3rd Street.
I wanted to address I'm going to step back here. The historic building, which is the bike shop. I believe that once we tear down any of those commercial buildings that were built at the turn of the century, like that building, that have the character that T-Wall is trying to recreate in a new building, the way that the Main Street is looking, it really can't be done in a modern standards like that. But why would we be tearing that down and putting a parking lot on that? And since we do not have a historic commission or committee currently, I guess we have to look to the planning committee, is that right? To help us determine whether or not tearing down some of those historic buildings like that are what we want to do with our downtown area. And we kept that with the Cultus building. We tried to keep that facade and keep that character that is part of our history. And that building right there in the corner was a farm implement store originally, which, yeah, so I mean, it's part of the agricultural history of our community. So I would like to have you come up with some ideas of how you're going to help preserve, and I know that that is something that is mentioned in the comprehensive plan, to preserve some of those historical buildings, and how you're going to do that.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Mary McNulty, 203 West 2nd Street. She is in support. She might speak if needed.
Well, you know, just really funny because what a nice speak. That's why I can't believe I just put that down. I was born a talker. I'll try to keep this short. I live in one of the houses. I live at 203 West 2nd Street. We bought one of the last houses that was affordable, that was well under $100,000 back in I think it was 91, and the next year, all of the houses on that street went up well above $100,000. We were very lucky to have been able to afford it. I think if we would have, because we wouldn't have been able to afford anything else here. I think that if we had 4 little boys and we didn't have a lot of money because we've had a lot of setbacks in our life from medical complications with children. Well, our intention was to, I love older houses, our intention was to rehab that house and just make it beautiful. That never came about because we didn't have the monies. The house itself, the skeletons are not very good. It's a balloon construction. There's very little that we can do about that. The basement is an old water cistern. It's got crumblings there. And I read a letter in the Tribune this past week from a resident on the 300 block of West 2nd Street who was saying how much love and how much he just bought this property and he remodeled it and he's so happy with it, and I didn't know who this was until I drove down the street, and I thought, wow, yeah, you did do a nice job and I would love to see the inside. Unfortunately, what it would take for me to bring my house up to those standards, as Terrence said, it is not profitable for me. And with my house, my husband and I are on the verge of retiring. I wouldn't be able to get a lot of money if I put my house on the market right now, and I've been offered a fairly decent price for my house right now that unfortunately Mike and I will have to move out of the area because we can't afford anything in Waunakee. But that's okay. We're looking at life leases because the circumstances in our life are a little bit different. We now have a handicapped person in our house. So anyway, the historical, I just hope that people are not thinking that our homes on that block are historical. I know a lot of my neighbors on 100 and in the 300 block, they have some beautiful homes. I mean, they are gorgeous. Their skeletons were good. And I love the fact that they can do that. I can't do it. And I'm very happy with this. I'm very pleased with what Mr. Wall has been coming up with as far as trying to keep the taste, the flavor of the neighborhood the same and matching it. I do agree that somehow, I think you should have two entrances, exits. I think you need to separate the one-story home or two-story homes, the homes on 2nd Street, and the business, the apartment building, business building, because you really do need to have 2 exits. And that's not going to be an easy thing, especially when people are expecting to have a garage down there. I understand slope and everything like that. What's really, really wonderful about our lots is that they're really, really, really deep. So everything that's planned is absolutely excellent. And it's really great to hear that there's going to be a new alleyway put in, because that alley hasn't been touched since I lived there. So, that's kind of nice. So basically what I'm saying is that I also don't mind the 4-story. I like the fact that it's set back. I think if you do it for one person, you have to do it for all. This community has to move forward to a certain extent. I mean, what blows me away is that I come to this meeting today and I'm trying to fight for this thing so that I can sell my house and buy a life lease place for my husband and I that we can actually afford. And there's another tyranny bill going up. Excuse me. All of this building up and around, but nothing here. And I'm done. And I'm done. That's all I wanted to say. But yeah, and I love what Mr. Kipley said. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Mary Heimbecker, 306 West 3rd Street, Waunakee. And did you want to speak or just want me to read it? Okay. She says, I'm opposed to 2nd Street homes being rezoned to multifamily. Next we've got Pat Molly, 409 Raymond Road, in support. Do you want to say anything, Pat?
No.
Next we've got Linda Ashmore, 114 South Street. She's opposed. She'd like to please provide a traffic study prior to any formal action on the T-Wall proposal. Any loss of... Okay. Got it. Any loss of level of service for traffic, consider not approving. Anything else or is that?
Just, I had seen the rendering before, so if they're gonna do the 4th floor, everything else, the materials seem to be matching, but the 4th floor just needs to start white, so the materials match if he's actually gonna go for it with this.
Okay, so she's talking about the 4th floor and it being kind of stark white. I will say that he did mention that it was kind of the sky color and trying to keep it in a
Yeah, I understood.
softer
He said
tone.
that it just couldn't work.
Okay. Next we have Mike.
Can I see?
I'll put you on here so I can hear that.
The last thing is, I don't think anybody's fighting about that you can sell your houses, that people can sell their houses. What we're upset about is what's going in. Redevelopment's okay. A great example is cottages on Main. You know, it fits in right next to Newell Gallery, there's a nice slope, and it's not so dense. Those are the things that we're looking for. So it's not that we're saying, no, don't sell, go ahead and sell. But the thing is that developers are here to make money, and the Plan Commission hopefully is here to represent citizens.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Michael Schaefer, 201 West 2nd Street, and he's in support. Michael, want to say anything?
No.
Okay. Okay, that's everybody. Anybody else want to speak? There's hands that have gone up. All right. We should have had a paper, right? Brian, I just want to make sure I'm doing it properly.
We can fill the paper right now.
Okay. So if you want to speak, kind of work your way up to the front here.
Mary Ellen Kearney, 317 West Main Street. I'm sorry, I didn't know we could even speak, so this is a joy. I just have a question in terms of the Main Street portion, why the big business thing is going to be facing toward all the residential areas, whereas the part that's really closest to where all the Main Street businesses is going to be vacant. And I think that you're facing more toward all the houses, the remaining houses on Main Street, as opposed to already the commercial district.
Is there anybody else?
Hi, my name's Edith Laufenberg, 234 Fairview Circle. I just want to say I agree with you. If you want me to start leaning even a little bit towards support, you have to think of the people that live on Main Street and are going to be looking at this building. you're thinking of the people who live on Second Street on the other side of the block, and you're making it look more like homes. For Main Street, no. We deserve to have them look like homes as well. I mean, I can't express that enough. We don't want this other stuff, and we certainly don't want the fourth floor. And by the way, the house I grew up on has one of those pitched roofs, and I can assure you, it is nothing but a cold, uninsulated attic. That's what they are. And I really, truly want something, a new design to show that the people that live on Main Street are taken care of as well. I also heard, gee, we're gonna do Second Street first so they don't have all that dust coming when we do Main Street. Hey, we live on Main Street. What about us? Thank you.
Okay, then I'm going to get comments from all the planning commissioners. I think Mr. Wall is entitled to hear our comments as well as all of yours. He's been willing to do that, and I think we need to hear from our planning commission members on what their feelings are, what their perceptions are of the project. So I will, who wants to go first?
My comments will be very brief. I like what Jason had to say, and slight tweaks to this I think make a lot of sense. It's important for Jason to have, obviously to fully approve this because he's our guy with our planning. He knows the comprehensive plan inside and out. So the comments that he made tonight about some of the design tweaks and so forth, and also about the fourth level on this, they fall in line with my comments as well.
Quite impressed, quite honestly, with the work that's already been put in, 2 neighborhood meetings, working with the chamber and the Rotary. Kind of curious about that conversation with the vacant space. There has been vacant space on Main Street for a while, and do we want to create that opportunity for additional vacant space? Is a question that we'll have to talk about here as well. Just surprised by these designs. First look at them, quite impressive. A lot of the work and detail and thought their team put into it is impressive. This is the first time that we've seen this as well, so we're trying to devour it and take it all in. Overall, though, sitting on the board now for a while, I haven't seen a developer put this much work and effort talking to the citizens prior to even talking to us. And I think that shows the strength of their willingness to work with the village of Waunakee.
Jason put it really well when he said this is an unapprovable plan. And I didn't even look at the detail that carefully because this is so far out of current zoning, I don't even think it's worth making comments on the architectural. We've got great staff that keep us in line in terms of approving what we're allowed to approve. In this case, the zoning, as I look at Ken Strauss's memo, allows for 41 units. There's 136 proposed. We're not even close to complying with the current zoning. I also believe the current zoning does a pretty good job of matching the integrity of our comprehensive plan. So I wouldn't necessarily be in favor of saying, well, let's change this to a different zoning that allows for 4 times more units than what's currently zoned. Unless, and you guys heard it, I hope consistently, when we had the vet clinic talk about going from C2 to C1, we don't do that unless it matches our comprehensive plan and supports our comprehensive plan. As I look at this and look at compatibility with the neighborhood, look at the current zoning and how it's there for a purpose to try to ensure that development is compatible with what's out there, we're a long ways off. And I appreciate Jason and Ed and their comments about architectural, trying to make a big building look small. Before I would even be comfortable giving comments about the architectural appearance and the layout of this, I guess I'd need to see something that actually meets our zoning code. And right now, we're not even close.
Thanks, Pat. Kind of a mixed, Pat, Brad, what you're talking about there. I do agree there's a lot of, I guess, the legalese, the dotting the i's, the crossing the t's that has to happen. We'll look to staff to kind of help guide us there, and I think that's really up to T-Wall and his group to sort of jump through those hoops and bring something back that fits within that zoning ordinance. So I would like to see a little more progression on that end of things. But I will speak to the effort and to the sort of the architectural look and fit and feel. I think that has gone a long way, and I think the effort there, it's worth something, because you don't run into that every day. You don't run into it with every developer that you try to deal with, and I think a pretty good effort has been made to try to make a project fittable, if that's a word, for this block and this area. So I do appreciate that effort, and I look forward to seeing future versions of that as it comes. In the Main Street comments, I get that as well. I drive up and down Main Street. I like the effort with the Colties and the old building and sort of incorporating that element. So I understand that's why what we're being presented and shown here. And from that standpoint, it makes sense. But at the same time, I get you turn around and it is all houses. I'd love to see it flip-flopped. I don't know that that's as far as the Main Street, which corners we have to wrap, because I do think that further that this type of Main Street element could get kind of to the east in the balance of the existing commercial space. It fit a little better, but it's not what we're unfortunately working with right now. So I'm still wrapping my head around this a little bit when I think of it. I do, generally speaking, like the effort and the direction. The fourth floor is a tough one for me to, tough pill to swallow at the moment. I don't know, I think just future iterations for me to kind of chew on and see how that one goes. So, I'm rambling.
I'll make mine relatively quick, because I think everybody's, at least on the board, kind of echoed what I would say. Other than thank you guys for coming out, right? And there's a lot of passion in the room, and thank you to Terrence and his team. I mean, I was quite blown away by the 2nd Street frontage, and candidly, when we got to this, it surprised me, because I thought that what was on 2nd Street was going to wrap around to Main Street, so they flanked on either end. I'm not a huge fan of that look for Main Street. I kind of like the residential feel, so that the people on the north side of Main Street are looking out at, what appears to be, as you guys are calling, single-family homes. So if there's a way to do that, once we get down the road, personally, I just think it's much more appealing. This is fairly dramatic, and I think we have a lot of this already in Waunakee. The 10,000 square feet, personally, is a big concern, and I think you said it, Terrence, in the sense that we haven't even leased the space that's there now in the Coltis building, and I think that that's been available for about 2 years now. So to have additional square footage vacant, I'm not sure is great for the village. But overall, thank you guys. I think everybody, it's nice to hear from both sides of the fence on this.
So I've been fairly quiet. Unfortunately, or fortunately, the community has spoken quite a bit on this project. What's been a little disappointing to me as a lifelong resident, it's Coltis, by the way, Brian. Jim and Jared, Jim would be upset selling Coltis, but it's Coltis lumber. Been a little disappointed at the negativity and the attacking that's gone on for some people here in the community. That's a bothersome thing for me as the village president. I would also like to recognize that we have one of our newest board members here, Joel Zitzelberger, is in the crowd. He's going to be dealing with this issue as well as the rest of the board. I echo Pat's comments very much and what I see and what is a potential. Looking at the project as a whole, this is in a completely different zone than any of our other complexes. And I call them complexes. So if you're looking at where the veterinary clinics are, where that's proposed, that's right across from multifamily housing. It's in a commercial zone. The projects downtown in the Coltis area, as well as the new Hubney property, the Main and Madison Street apartments, the Summit Credit Union, that all fits. It's not in a residential zone. It's just not. This is a little bit more of a challenge to get that to work. And I'd like that they made some efforts. The very first renditions, and I spoke in error at a public listening session, that I hadn't really gone over this project. I did have an opportunity to see it. And I'll openly admit that to anybody here. It was basically in a 10-minute presentation after a tech staff meeting that I attend on Mondays. I'm not one to hide anything. I did see it, and my comments were the same as they were now. That building was too big, too many apartments, not enough parking at the time, and traffic was going to be, I just couldn't see that as being a positive thing in that area. Those were my comments at tech staff, right after tech staff, and then it was proposed in front of the community at one of our plan commission meetings. And at that meeting, it was met with significant resistance, which I anticipated it would at that time. I'm only one voting member of this body, just as I am of the village board. And I think this project is going to be a challenge at the massing that it's at right now. I don't like the Main Street facade at all currently, but as Pat said, it doesn't really matter at this point because it doesn't meet the requirements. The backside, 2nd Street, same thing. Doesn't really matter at this point, but there's a serious effort being made by Mr. Wall to try and come up with a program and building that would make sense for our community. I think we're going to see more things from him. I hope he doesn't. I don't want to scare off any developer. I think that's not a good thing for our community. Our community is growing. Some are going to say we're growing too fast. Some are going to be saying we're growing too slow. Some people say our government moves too fast. Some people say it moves too slow. Okay, I think that Waunakee is a great place for all of us to be, and I don't think you're going to have a member on this plan commission or village board that's going to feel any different than that they want this to continue to be a great community. I will say to Mr. Wall that to make a comment that say blocks that look nice in the village, I think all our blocks look nice in the village. I'm proud of everything in our village. Is there things that could be brought up a little bit nicer? Absolutely. And I would expect neighbors to talk to one another when those things are happening, or help one another, as opposed to sitting back and just watching somebody not have a good experience in life, and their properties may go the wrong way. Everybody doesn't have good luck all the time. Bad luck happens, okay? When those times happen, we need to be as a group to pick those up. I'm proud of what our village is. I'm proud of what's happened in the last 20 years to our village. I think our Main Street is going to continue to thrive. It's been a goal of the village board for our Main Street to be a thriving area. Is traffic going to get any better? I've heard comments about traffic. Traffic in Waunakee is not going to get better. Let me repeat myself. Traffic is not going to get better in Waunakee on Main Street. Is Dane growing? Yes. Is Lodi growing? Yes. Is DeForest growing? Yes. Is Sauk growing? Yes. And guess who comes through our village? All of them. So we bring traffic through from them as well, in addition to the growth we're experiencing. So we have to keep that in mind, that we have to come up with solutions. Our county and our state are going to be responsible for that to a certain degree, in figuring out how they can get traffic through Waunakee efficiently. Anybody opposed to the roundabout when it went in the room? Okay? People would say right now that traffic flows a lot more efficiently through Waunakee. Problem with the efficiency is sometimes it's hard to turn left, or it's hard to cross the road. Absolutely the truth. But their goal is to get traffic through efficiently and effectively. And that has been accomplished, for the most part. So, my feelings are pretty clear on this. I did not like the initial concept. I think that they're making strides for this, but at this point it doesn't meet their, what our current ordinances and definitions are. So until we see something like that, I don't see anything progressing. That would be my comments. Does anybody have any additional that they'd like to make? Okay, no action tonight, right? Just that? Okay. All right. So our next item on the agenda, under new business, discuss and take action on site plan for the proposed Meadowbrook Park shelter. Just as exciting for those who are leaving. Okay, Who's taking this one? Kevin?
Okay.
All right, let's just take 30 seconds here so people can clear. If you'd like to speak, we have a great area out in front.
Thank you.
That you're welcome to go in and speak out there. That'll allow us to get going with the rest of our business. Thank you to everybody for participating. Thank you for Terrence and his team for coming tonight and presenting as well. Thank you. Okay.
Attached to the packet was a copy of the site plan and some elevations of the proposed shelter building in Wood Park. My commissioners are suited, you want it, 15-minute presentation, or certainly staff is comfortable with the proposed design. Our engineers, our consultant engineers actually helped with some of the site plan, make sure we have proper drainage and the lighting meets our standards. We certainly are supportive. We didn't really have any concerns.
Okay, I don't think we had anybody that wanted to speak on this, did we? No? Okay. Comments from our...
Makes sense. Budget? Okay.
In line.
Steve just asked if the budget was okay. The answer is yes with this. Any other comments? Okay, then I'd look for a motion.
Make a motion to approve park shelter is subject to any changes at Parks and Rec.
Motion by Tim Black,
Second.
second by Brian Young. Any other comments?
Timeline? Roughly?
Construction this summer,
Okay. Finished by?
October 1st.
So the question was, construction should be this summer, finished by October 1st?
I think so.
Okay, any other comments?
Call the question.
Call the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Next, we've got discuss and take action on temporary zoning classification for Tierney annexation, 130 acres southwest corner of Woodland and County Highway Q.
In past action, the Plan Commission's been supportive of the petition to annex in the area on the west side of Highway Q, near the intersection of Woodland Drive. This is a process that's needed in terms of the annexation that we have to, when we annex property into the village, it has to come in with a zoning classification. And the current zoning classification is it's village zoning, but it's in what's called temporary county ag land zoning, and we need to bring it into village zoning. So in essence, you're rezoning it from A to A. It's just a different type of classification. So the classification that we're proposing to bring it into is the ag holding district, and it'll just be a temporary holding district until we see revised plans that come in after the petition. So the action that you're taking tonight is a recommendation to the village board on the rezone from ag to ag.
Thank you. Okay, we had one comment from Sam Kaufman, 908 Turnberry Drive. He says you need to wait a few months or a year before rezoning, annexing land for another high-end housing development. Okay, anybody else? Comments from board members?
That's straightforward.
I think I'll just make one comment in that regard. Another high-end housing development. Our developments are good developments for our community. There's people that are going to be against any development. We put a lot into our developments, and Mr. Tierney puts a lot into those. He takes a lot of risk with what he does. He does more for those than any developer would normally. You can say that I'm a fan of Don's. That's fine if you want to say that. What I'm a fan of is that Don puts the materials in and does a great development. And if his residents have problems, he's going to be there to help them and get it done. There's a lot of developers that do their development and walk away. He's one that's been here and has continued to stay here. So as far as high end, we really can't control what houses people build. If they choose to build a high-end house, that's their choice in those subdivisions. So, any other comments? Ed?
I just want to make a comment that this whole process was vetted at a county level, and we got the urban service areas approved, and it's compatible with the county.
Okay. Did everybody hear that, or do you think it need to be repeated? Everybody good? Okay. All right, any other comments? Okay, look for a motion.
Make a motion to recommend the village board that as part of the annexation ordinance, the land which is subject to the annexation be rezoned from A1 agricultural to A1 holding district. Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. I'll just make one other comment. When this land is annexed into the village, how many people know, is the new intermediate school in Waunakee or Westport?
Westport.
Okay, you think that causes us any issues? For policing and all different other things? And roads? There's so many different things. When this development occurs, the school will be automatically annexed into the village. That's already established. In addition to their one residence that's there as well, right next to the school, that will also be annexed into the village. Okay? All right, so we've got a motion and a second. Yeah.
Just to clarify, it's going to be rezoned into the A1 agricultural holding district, which is what our code requires. It's going to be changed from the temporary county zoning. Just to make that clarification.
Thank you. Does anybody need to repeat that? Everybody get it? Okay. Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay. Last, we've got discussion direction on proposed zoning changes. Under new business. Kevin?
Staff has 6 possible zoning amendments to our code. We did have a public or open house prior to the planning commission meeting, got some good feedback. Jason's going to go through these 6 potential amendments. What he'll do is he'll go through the amendments, and then for each one of these we have at least some recommended action or no action on some items. Then we'll also try and give you some feedback from what we got from the public during the open house.
All right, go ahead with the first one, Kevin. So the C1D ordinance, C1D district was recently amended to kind of set some specific standards with regard to how and to what extent additional height would be allowed in that district. And this effort to provide more detail and more explicit standards that will guide the approval of conditional use permits, as I'm sure you've already been hearing, is going to be something that you're going to be looking to do kind of throughout the ordinance, but it was kind of low-hanging fruit to look at the other districts that allow height, additional height in a similar way by conditional use permit, and to suggest that there should, for those districts as well, be some more specific guidelines, specific standards that would guide them, that would guide that conditional use permit process. So the only thing I would note from the comp plan is that, as we've talked about tonight, the comp plan encourages compatibility in adjacent uses, and so that's the kind of thing that we would be looking for, where proposed taller building would be adjacent to a more restrictive, lower intensity district. So tentatively, new standards would be modeled after what was already changed for the C1D district, but I think there's certainly some room for further discussion about what really makes sense for each of these districts that have that similar allowance right now. The staff recommendation is that we would go ahead and draft some potential changes. And I think tonight, seeking your feedback, whether you would direct staff to go ahead and do that. In terms of comments that we got from those that attended the open house, there were some questions about, well, you know, if we're going to get very specific in what we allow, why not just set the rules and be done instead of having to be part of the conditional use permit process? Valid question and line of thought. I think there is some. It is compelling that we want to have some flexibility. The whole idea of the conditional use permit process is that in some cases, in this case, additional height, it should be fine. In other cases, it may not be, and that's why it was originally put there. What else, Kevin, would you add in terms of what we heard? So we want to do this item by item. Yeah, so questions?
We don't need action, we just need clear direction from the planning commission that you concur probably with our staff recommendation to proceed. You're not approving anything tonight, you're just telling us to proceed with the process of changing our zoning code as recommended. I don't need action, just need to generally sense that you guys are all in agreement with that.
And I would tell you, and I was there for as much of that meeting as I could be today. I thought it was great to see the public input the way you got it. I also trust that staff, and with Jason, who does this for many other communities, can sort of follow best practices for which, well, you know, and give us a great spot to start, and then point out, and this is how they've always worked, what are the true policy decisions here? There's some things that are just, you know, changes in laws and things other communities do that make a lot of sense. But then normally staff will come back to us and say, hey, you know, this really is a policy decision, let's discuss this. But I know of the 6 things that I saw up on the board today, the recommendation from staff seemed very appropriate in terms of what I would have expected. And it seemed like the community felt that that was sort of the direction to go also.
Okay. All right, now I got my direction.
Any other comments?
Okay, the second one, this is potentially a big one. You've had for 20 plus years an ordinance that requires that you maintain a certain balance of single family and multifamily. And there's some issues right now with the wording. It's not clear that it applies to the balance in the entire village when you're looking at a specific project. It pertains to only to the rezoning of. So if you're already zoned in a certain district that allows multifamily, there's no limit on building multifamily in that district. It only pertains to the rezoning of, but it only addresses specific districts, not all districts that allow multifamily. So it addresses the R4, R5 PUD. It doesn't address C1D in particular. The comp plan reinforces that this is something that the village wants. It is a general policy, but also suggests that there would be exceptions for redevelopment projects and for senior housing. Certainly the comp plan encourages a variety of housing in neighborhoods. The bottom line, so the memo I wrote has a number of potential changes, and I can answer questions about those if you'd like. The bottom line is that this is a complicated issue that requires further discussion, and the staff recommendation is that a committee be put together to dig into this and talk about the comp plan policy, talk about current conditions as documented by the CARPC study, and come forward with some recommendations. So staff could work with that committee to craft some recommendations that would potentially result in amendment of this ordinance. In terms of comments that we got from the audience at the at the open house session. I guess I didn't have.
They wanted some representation from the downtown residents.
Thank you. Yeah, representation from folks downtown, but also, you know, representation from everywhere. It's not just folks downtown. So some variety of perspectives that include downtown residents would be appropriate. If you agree that this would be that'd be an appropriate
I
tactic.
really envision this committee coming forward with a housing policy. Out of that housing policy, and then we'll establish rules and regulations. And I think as we work through some of these issues, how much flexibility we want to allow in some of these ordinances to make some decisions will have to be made through this whole process. But I said we probably look for the plan commission chair to figure out the composition of that committee, and it's going to take many months probably for us to work through this process. How do we count these? Who gets exempted? How do you apply this across all zoning districts? A lot of details that have to be worked out, and it's got to be done at probably a working group rather than at a public meeting. At least in terms of getting a working draft to the planning commission. All right.
Okay. All right, third item is the density calculation in C1D. So this is a very detailed recommendation. The Opti project was approved in such a way that it gave them credit for a couple of off-site parcels that were directly related to that development for parking and for stormwater use. And staff opinion is that that's an appropriate strategy for flexibility in trying to facilitate successful downtown redevelopment, understanding that you tend to have small lots, you have a lot of streets and smaller blocks that constrain options, and that you're seeking good design and pedestrian-friendly design. And so the suggestion here is that more explicitly formalizing that in the ordinance would be appropriate, and the recommendation is that staff go ahead and draft something for Plan Commission and public consideration. In terms of public comment that we got tonight,
there was a concern about limiting how far away those particular uses could be to be counted. So it wouldn't be. At least what we heard is it's not reasonable to count something that's a block away or a couple blocks away and count it as part of a lot area. So restriction in terms of how far, and I think we can work it. I think we already had some ideas on putting some restrictions on that particular use. There was a concern about the using public facilities in terms of the taxation on those properties. It's not something that at least the four of us have expertise on. We really didn't have a good answer for that. Maybe that's something we can work with the assessor on. I didn't hear a lot of terms of opposition in terms of the policy of using it, other than they want to make sure it was consistent with the comprehensive plan.
I guess one question along that, is this something, Jason, that other communities do? Look at challenges to infill developments like this. This is a type of strategy that people have used to say, hey, this seems to make sense from an approval standpoint in a commercial zoning, given some credit to what they're doing in the overall area, not just on the land that they have.
I couldn't point you to a specific ordinance. I can tell you that there are often various strategies that are employed to provide flexibility and trying to figure out how to get projects done. In some respect, this is maybe it's related to the way that your ordinance was already written in terms of the density standard. But I think we'd likely find some precedent. I can't decide it right now.
Okay. Well, Pat, I would say there are many communities that don't have this. Okay. So it's not it's not something they have to.
Their zoning doesn't limit the number of units based on square footage, so they don't got to do a workaround. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. And so, I think we we could be opening up a whole slew of additional issues perhaps as we dig into this. But we could talk about also changing the density standards where we're more focused on form than we are on number of units. But that's a can of worms potentially. So. All right, item 4 is the minimum lot area for a PUD. Right now, the ordinance requires for a commercial PUD 2 acres minimum. Any other PUD 5 acres. And you know, in some instances, the PUD process and the PUD method can be used very effectively to get creative and high quality development that doesn't seem to quite fit under existing other zoning districts. Clearly, this is one that would come into play with the T-Wall project if it were to be changed. And I don't know that that's why this was proposed. There are other projects that have come up. Kevin, if you could repeat the example.
Yeah, the example that I gave at the open house was the Marine Street, just off of Madison Street, where we have the box type housing. In order to come, we were talking at some point with a potential developer of doing some townhouses there. In order to do that project, we would have had to make some either changes to our zoning or to PUD, and it would have fit the acreage requirement in terms of the PUD. So in order to get a project, which I think the one that we were looking at was pretty highly desirable in terms of redevelopment of that area, we either needed some additional tools in order to accomplish that. So that was one example. I know, I think I did share with T-Wall probably 3-4 weeks ago that the Planning Commission would likely probably stay with traditional zoning in the downtown area, and that, you know, the PUD, the downtown, just for the purposes of bypassing some of the standards in the downtown, probably wouldn't be appropriate. They're probably going to, I think you guys were somewhat split on it, but my sense is that the ones that were Chris and Pat are like, well, here's the constraints. If you want to rezone, you got to stay with the downtown commercial zoning in order to make that happen and make it fit. So it's a little bit, you know, I certainly respect that if there is a big, you know, understanding and you're trying to make that T-Wall project happen the way it's proposed now, well, maybe PUT is an appropriate tool to be allowed. You guys gave a little bit of a mixed reaction to the T-Wall proposal.
The only thing I would add is that we did talk about we spent some time talking about how PUD works because we got questions about, well, is this just the developer inventing what they want? So we kind of talked about how it is a negotiation. And we also related the experience in Madison, which for many years used the PUD method on many parcels, individual parcels, small projects, as a way to get around what wasn't approvable by other means, and is now dealing with a huge volume of these site-specific standards that they have to go and deal with every time something comes up on that site. And so, especially in a bigger city, you can imagine what a headache that is. Madison went the direction of trying to limit the use of PUD as much as possible by, when they redid their whole code, using many districts, so that there's just about a district for everything that you might come up with. The other thing that I emphasized is that even if you are changing the zoning, if you are kind of inventing something that doesn't fit other districts, what's approved under PUD still has to fit the comprehensive plan. So you're not starting with a blank slate, even if you are starting with PUD. So, and I think there are some ways that PUD can be an attractive tool to get to high quality, compact development. So I think you can make the case for, but I also think that you want to be careful about not opening the floodgates to everyone saying, well, I just want to do my own thing, I'll work with you, let's do a PUD, and then you have a whole bunch of these to manage over the decades.
So this is one that we're looking for some feedback. I think Chris said he gets one vote on the Planning Commission, one on the board. I get 0 votes on either. And that this is a policy decision. This is really one that we really need some feedback from the Planning Commission on in terms of their desire to make changes in this. I know Brian's got something to say.
Well, I was just gonna say, I mean, many different options for you to think about. One option is, you know what, we don't feel it's appropriate to make any changes at this point in time, so we don't want staff to look into it further, and we're just gonna keep it the way it is. Another is there a reason why why the ordinance differentiates between uses? In other words, some communities may have a minimum acreage, but that's just for PUD in general, and the minimum acreage applies the same to all of them. Another option is, when you look at this, someone may make an argument that says, what's the basis for distinguishing between mixed use and commercial? And there may be a reasonable argument there, but then, one simple fix to that is say, you know what, we're going to make commercial PUD 5 acres. And then if you went in that direction, then you effectively have no need to differentiate between the uses because you would have established minimum acreage for all PUDs as 5 acres. And I'm not trying to direct you in one direction or other. I'm just saying those are the types of options that I think that you have at this point. And then again, one of the options is to say, you know what, we're not going to cross this bridge right now. We have plenty of other things that we're looking at. We're just going to leave it the way it is.
I was just going to share that I think those of you that are still here, I think there was a better understanding of what a PUD is. I think there was a lack of understanding. It was a creative zoning tool that was created decades ago, used across the country. And I think the other thing that was important is that the residents that were here earlier, you're not using a PUD to give a developer an upper hand. You're using a PUD to creatively solve a problem in light of some of these decisions or parameters, maybe a better word to use, these parameters. But you're actually using this creative tool to add specificity to a particular problem solving. That's what's so powerful about it. You actually have more specifics than less if you do it.
Okay. I don't know what happened to the microphone, but I'll try to be as loud as I can. Brad?
Yeah. Well, I guess the timing is what scares me a little bit right now. I guess I just hate to all of a sudden decrease the size required for PUD for residential when I was just up here telling somebody they couldn't do PUD because they didn't have a big enough lot. So I would worry about the timing and what a developer might take that to mean. So that's my opinion.
I agree. I think timing is suspect. And I'm not overly comfortable at this point doing it.
I kind of leaning that way too, the not doing anything, but I guess I might have some curiosities maybe from staff looking into the multiple PUD versus a singular, the whys, the why nots, advantages, disadvantages to doing that versus maybe what some of our sister communities around town do. Just curious if we're an anomaly or if this is a standard. So inclined to not do anything, but curious to hear more.
Can we ask for one clarification from the board or the staff?
Sure.
A multi-family development, is that classified as commercial, residential, or mixed use?
Well, if it has commercial, it's
A multifamily development is by definition residential. If it has commercial in it as well, it is mixed use.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm inclined not to make any changes right now, period. Not interested. Okay, Ben?
All right, item 5 is the transitional height standards. The comp plan, as we've talked about, emphasizes the importance of transitions and compatibility between adjacent uses. And right now your code does have some language that addresses this topic, and it's focused on setbacks. So at the boundary between two districts, the less restrictive district that allows more building and more intensity to occur has to match the setbacks of the more restrictive district that it joins. The suggestion is that there could be some additional language in the ordinance that would also address height, potentially requiring that height in excess of what's allowed in one district be set further back when you're joining that lower intensity district. Also that larger buildings in terms of massing, so long buildings, use architectural strategies that break up the apparent mass. And so I think the T-Well project tonight is a good example of a project that does look to do some of that, and that those types of strategies could be incorporated in some way into the ordinance. So that's some of the possible changes. We weren't making a recommendation pending getting some feedback from you about that. In terms of feedback that we heard, I don't recall that there was
I
much.
think it was pointed out that there's more to this than just setbacks and height requirements. There's going to be lot coverage and massing, maybe part of this. I thought it was a recent comment that if there's a way to regulate more than just setback and height, that we should look at that as well.
So I think we're seeking your feedback. Is this something you want staff to explore?
I guess it's back to that best practices. I mean, if you think it helps us when we're presented with a proposal to do the right thing relative to our comp plan, it might make some sense. If you think it's something that we can deal with as part of the approval process, maybe we don't need it. So, it's hard when there isn't hey, here's an example of when this would have been nice to have. So lacking an example of when it would have been nice to have, I guess maybe we don't need to worry about it if we think we can deal with it just through our normal approval process. So
I think one of the reasons why this is identified in the report is Dr. Random during one of the village board meetings, he made it, and he was using the Hufty, and he said, Hufty works where it's at because of what's surrounding it. And I think he made a statement to the effect of, in a different circumstance, he was focused on the height issue, he would have been more concerned with, the height of the building as it compares to adjacent properties. And as a result of that, we had known about the setback language, and I think that's when Kevin said, hey, maybe we look into this. And I think based on what you guys are saying, it sounds like if we look into this and we find that some solutions that we think make sense, we should bring it to you. But if we research it and it doesn't seem to make sense, then it wouldn't come back before you.
Okay.
All right. The last item is the parking standards. You have granted exceptions to the parking standards in recent years at the request of developers who've said they think it's excessive. You've looked around at neighboring community ordinances and reached the same conclusion. And my own opinion, you are in some cases requiring more than you need to, and so I think you're due. So the recommendation is that we kind of collect some examples from communities in the region and offer a recommendation for some new standards.
I agree. Would agree. This is one that seems to come up every single time we look at something. And we just should have something that's a little more concrete, a little more understandable. So I think the idea of focusing on some other plans or other restrictions or so forth that other communities have, that's probably a good thing. I mean, there must be, if you average all these out, there must be just about the perfect plan for what we use. So,
And I'll tell you that we did hear comments that we heard concern that, well, let's make sure we still have enough parking downtown. And when looking at examples, let's look at communities that are the most comparable to us. So, maybe, for example, Sun Prairie might be a better fit than Middleton is, based on having a state highway through downtown, for example. But we'll look at multiple communities and kind of industry best practice to make some recommendations. And it's going to be both about the kind of calculated standards, but also strategies, I think, for allowing for shared parking, shared use parking, trying to make the most efficient use of parking spaces while still having enough.
I would request that you look at Sauk and Prairie Sac.
Mhm.
You just had
Sauk City and Prairie.
Vintage restaurant. That's some friends that invited us to go there, and we'll just say that there was no parking at the establishment, so we just need to make sure we have some sort of standards for what we're looking at doing. Is this still on? Oh, there's better, sorry. With that, so anyways, that's just an example I just encountered, and everybody was on the streets and around the corner, and maybe it's just because it's just opened, but anyway, it's something to look at. All right, we can move on with our Waunakee Westport Joint Planning Commission items for action. We've got the Woodland Crest annexation update. We just went over that. I don't think we need to talk about that.
I can address all of them at the same time. 1 and 5 we've already talked about. 2, 3, and 4 are really 2 are initial consultations. We won't know what those are when we get there tomorrow night. In the public hearing regarding the sheds, have the rezoning allow shed in town of Westport really has no impact on it. It's their issue. It's their issue.
Okay, so we don't have a lot to tell our Joint Planning Commission members. Okay, perfect. All right, then we look for one more motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Brad Zeman, second by Steve Kraus. All in favor, say aye. Aye, opposed? Ayes have it. Thanks, everyone.
All right.